Alan Quinlan, how are you keeping?
I'm very good, lads, and yourselves?
Flying it. You were tuned into Ronan earlier.
I was, yeah.
He's not coming back, I don't think, was the short story.
Yeah, I suppose he's deflecting on that. But
life is good.
Clear, yeah.
And like, you don't want there to be an arrogance about the question to be asked either, because like, why would you want to leave a club like La Rochelle, who are European champions, competing in the top 14, like one of the best clubs in the world? It'd be an arrogant suggestion to think that, you know, he must come back to Ireland because that's the next stage in his career. He's doing just fine at a huge club in Europe.
Yeah, it's an added bonus for him that he's a team that are progressing. They obviously won in Europe. They've been knocking on the door for in the top 14, getting right to challenge for that league title for the last couple of seasons as well. So progressive team. He's got a few signings this year. They love him out there. So there's a lot of positives for him and why he wouldn't come back. Obviously, there's always going to be a draw at some stage, and there's always going to be speculation about, you know, any jobs that are come up with any of the provinces, vacancies with the national side. You know, you think he's probably next in line, but he's probably continuously going to be asked for the next number of years, until the point when La Rochelle start losing games and there's a bit of dismay there, which
doesn't look likely to happen.
That doesn't happen. Yeah, I think he's done a really good job probably, and there's no doubt he's done a really good job there. And you know, it's obviously we've heard lots of coaches over the years speak about the culture in France and having incredibly talented players, but maybe not the drive and desire that certain people, you know, would have been used to here with less talent, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's respectable. So I think if you get incredibly powerful athletes who are, you know, really good work ethic and they look after themselves off the pitch a lot, and they understand that, you know, if you want to challenge in Europe and if you want to challenge and win trophies, that there's an added kind of impetus around, you know, the way you look after yourself as well, that you can't just rely on that athletic ability. And I think he's probably, when he was at Racing first, that would have been a challenge at the start, and then Grant Carter comes in, and the more and more you have these conversations around that stuff, and other players see it and they start to do it. So it doesn't guarantee a success, but I think he's done a brilliant job, and you know, the scenes last year after they won the European Cup in La Rochelle for the few days afterwards were, you know, he's a hero there now, no matter what happens.
We touched on the difficulties or otherwise, Quinny, earlier of a Munster man taking the reins in some fashion at Leinster and vice versa. Like, should that be an issue? Like, I guess it's down to an individual thing, but I think Rog said I'm from Cork was his answer earlier. Is I'm from Tip? That would be your response probably if you posed the question.
Obviously it's more difficult than a normal situation if you haven't played for so long for Munster. We've had, of course, when I played, there was a couple of players who went and played with Leinster, and that wasn't seen as you know, being a traitor or anything, because some of these guys were, you know, they weren't regular starters. Stephen Keogh and Trevor Hogan were two to come to mind, two great lads who weren't regular starters, so they were getting an opportunity to maybe enhance themselves more in a Leinster shirt. You know, you had Sean Cronin, who started out when Munster, and obviously went on. Owen Redden, they went on to have brilliant success with Leinster and then in turn with Ireland. So it's a little bit different. You know, Declan Kidney had a short spell with as coach with Leinster, and then came back to Munster and won the European Cup, and was kind of frowned upon by, you know, some people in Leinster. But
well, sure. I mean,
it'd be a big move. It'd be a big move for him to go there. But you know, from a professional point of view, if you're looking at working with, going into an environment that's incredibly successful, and you would imagine will continue to be pretty successful given the structures they have in place and the playing numbers and the school systems, which are very strong here. From a professional point of view, it would be a pretty attractive proposition. But I heard you saying this morning that you could see him going to England ahead of Leinster, which should be...
Well, he
that's
gave
another...
when we asked him about England, when you remember he was on BT last year and it all came up, and it was like, you know, Eddie Jones was under pressure and everybody was like, oh, this guy would be a great fit. He was definitely sort of, at that point, I felt that answer was more, I might
Closer.
actually do that at some point.
More open.
Yeah, I think he'd probably get less stick for taking the English job, which just sounds crazy, really, doesn't it? Than if he took the Leinster job. But I don't know. Like, I can see him. His family are well settled in France. There's a nice lifestyle there, good climate. You've been on holidays in La Rochelle. It's pretty nice there.
Cheese and wine as well.
Yeah.
Plenty of it over there.
So, yeah, I think it just depends. But I would never close. There was one thing I would say about Ronan, knowing him. Something you could rule him out of something, and he could just come on next week and surprise you and take the Leinster job. You know what I mean, or something like that. So he's right. I think he's pretty determined. He backs himself in whatever decisions he makes. It was obviously very brave what he did. You know, to head straight off after he retired, because he could have stayed here and slipped into the system here for a year or two and then went. But he just up sticks with his family and went off, and you know, obviously going to New Zealand as well. So he backs himself when he makes these decisions. It isn't as if he goes and asks 10 friends, what should I do or shouldn't do? You know,
and it's like,
he's very determined, and
we're all transfixed with the idea that he needs to come home, or he'll come home at some point or other. And he obviously, everything you've ever heard him say on air is like, I'm absolutely fine. I'm ploughing my own furrow here, and life is good. And I think we should take that as it is.
I think if something came up with Ireland and you know, again, it's speculation. I think.
And that isn't coming up anytime soon either. So
I think we will at some stage see him back in Ireland, whether it be with one of the provinces or with the national side.
Couple of coaching tickets under a bit of pressure early doors, meeting tonight in Galway, and like, you know, the starts have been sticky. The new nature of the league means that, like, you know, it's less forgiving for losing those early games than it might have been in previous years when they get further down the track. So big pressure on both sides, and like a loss tonight really for either one is going to really turn up the dial for them. Yeah,
it is. There's been a bit of, these games have been pretty feisty the last couple of years, and there's been a bit of niggle in it, and there's a desperation from both sides. And probably with both sides tonight, Adrian, I think there's probably a lack of cohesion and a lack of confidence in the way they're playing and the way they're executing, and that kind of feel-good factor when you go out onto a sports field and you talk about having your flow and even having, you know, good periods in the game. It was an incredibly difficult start for Connacht. You know, to go to Belfast at any stage is tricky. Even though they've had success and won up there in recent years, it doesn't give you much kind of wriggle room really when you have to go there in your first game, and then you're in South Africa against the Stormers and the Bulls, more or less at full strength, shorn of a player or two here and there that were involved in the Rugby Championship with the Springboks, but a lot of strength there. And so in some ways it's a little bit false on Connacht, in a sense that I've said this, you know, most teams would struggle to go to South Africa now. You'd need to be fully locked and loaded going to South Africa, expecting to get a win and run them close. So maybe we're kind of judging Connacht falsely here a little bit. We'll know tonight. I think they will. Obviously, the challenge for them is, you know, they've only had a couple of sessions this week, because they only got back, I think, Sunday, and I'm not sure if they trained Monday or what their schedule was this week, but probably the most they could have had this week is 2 pitch sessions on the new 4G pitch. But they've a kind of amount of work done in the last few weeks that they can rely on. They had a player meeting before they departed South Africa, trying to address some of the issues. So you've got to keep fighting. It's very early doors for both sides, and both of them have issues. Connacht are giving away a lot of penalties. They're the most penalised team in the competition so far. Munster aren't far behind. I think 41 penalties, Connacht. Munster 38 or something. So that tells you that you're porous, you're panicking, you're not able to deal with pressure. Because, you know, obviously under pressure you make those decisions to, you know, be offside or not have your discipline spot on, or losing ball at breakdown. I think Munster have had a lot of turnovers at the breakdown. They're not easy fixes. They take some time. So, Connacht, look, they'll be chomping at the bit. to try and get a win tonight. And for either side, if they get some sort of I think for Munster going away to Galway, if they were to get a result, I don't think they even need the best performance. If they get a result, I think that will give them a lot of.
Yeah, I think whoever ends up on the winning side tonight, suddenly it's as is the nature of these things, everything's grand and the other team are not. What
it's results based, isn't it? Tonight, really, not performance based.
No, exactly. But speaking of performance, I'm forgetting about some of the stuff that you've mentioned there in terms of like the errors count and the issues that are documented now. We're 3 games in, so it's probably not a bad chance to take a bit of a sense check as to your view of what the new coaching ticket, what style they're trying to play, or what, once this starts coming together, what's going to be the personality of this Munster team in terms of the style of play.
No, I think they're definitely trying to be a little bit more expansive and keep the ball alive a little bit more. Munster Connacht do that more naturally, don't they? Because they've been doing it for a number of years, and they're a very exciting side to watch. And I think that's the biggest concern. They've conceded 15 tries. They've only scored 5 in the first 3. That's kind of un-Connacht-like. They usually get 3 or 4 tries a game. Even if they lose a game, it's a high-scoring game. So they're definitely much more comfortable with their lines of running and their support play and the pace. The issues Connacht have is probably having that bit of ferocity up front and that physical power at times, which just seems to be a stumbling block that's holding them back, and it's difficult. In an ideal world, you want a big strong pack and then loads of power there. They've lots of good players, I'm not saying that, but just underpowered a little bit from a physical point of view. But for Munster, I think trying to move the ball more sounds simple, and it frustrates me having to watching the last couple of games, because I don't know, my mindset when I played was probably a little bit too loose around 20-yard passes and offloads and stuff like that, and at times I had to reel myself in, and I would have got into trouble with coaches in my time, particularly with Ireland, trying to be move the ball from the ball is kicked off and you're in your own 22, and I'm trying to figure out how do you run past guys and pass here and keep it alive. The game has changed because you make mistakes in your own half too much and people kick goals and the pressure, the breakdown and all that. Munster have got to get that balance right, and I think that's what Mike Prendergast and Dennis Leamy and Andy Kiriakou and Graham Rowntree, of course, as a group of coaches, they'll be trying to get a little bit more tempo in Munster's game, utilise a little bit of width, keeping the ball alive. And I always think back, I played in Munster teams that were very direct, and ROG would have kicked a lot, and we mauled a lot, and we had one-out runners a lot, and it was intense, it was exciting, it was there was tempo to it because it was all done at pace and it was done with real ferocity at the breakdown, and teams couldn't slow us down or stop us even if they had the defensive line, because we were very aggressive and direct. So I think you still have to have a bit of the old school approach where you have to kick a lot. The modern game dictates that. You're coming up against technically very good people across the board in the breakdown. But I think what kind of concerned me a lot in the last couple of weeks was some of the catch pass stuff, which you would think would be better. But if you're not doing that stuff for long periods of time, and it's not just the first, it's not really first and second phase or third phase or fourth phase. It's when you get into multi-phase, that's where Munster lose their shape a lot. And that's the biggest challenge, and that's what Mike Prendergast will be trying to do, is when you get into the multi-phase stuff, what's your body shape like? Are you square to the, what way are your hips? Are you running across the field? Are you fixing a defender? Are you running a line that's going to hold a defender? All that kind of stuff. So they've got to get better at that, and I think it will take time. So the word patience has been mentioned a fair bit, and this is just a reality. I think Munster need to, the players themselves need to take a little bit more control around their desire and their aggression. And I said this in the podcast during the week. Peter O'Mahony was the one that was showing the fight. He was the one that was being confrontational.
Literally, yeah.
But like, that's the quickest solution here. If you have mistakes and you're lacking confidence and you're dropping balls and your lines of running and things are not correct, the quickest solution to try and get it some flow and momentum is not about, I'm not saying, because there's obviously a lot spoke about the physicality of the game during the week and dementia and links to motor neurons, things, all this kind of stuff. I'm not saying go out and start bashing people, but I'm saying the quickest solution is to try and win those physical contests, which is within your control. And I think that's what Munster have to do tonight. They need to go to Galway and try and impose themselves a little bit, be confrontational, go toe-to-toe a little bit, and then obviously not overcomplicate what they're trying to do there, because if they think they can go there and just throw the ball around and this ball's going to be thrown on the ground again and that's going to suit, it's going to take some time, the attack game, and people need to realise that, because you're changing behaviours that have been implemented, or not implemented, I should say, over the last number of years.
Because that was a shortcoming on behalf of the coaches that were there at that time, or because it wasn't part of the game plan and now they've changed things, so it dictates
There's a mixture here of accountability from the players and some of them showing us, I'm not saying that they're not good enough, but showing us examples where it's indicating that they're not good enough. They've got to play better than that. They've got to be more forthright in their own assessment of their performances. They've got to put their hands up, and they've got to do it. There's no point in going into videos and nodding at the attack coach or defence coach. Like, if you're missing tackles in a game and the defence coach is showing you a system where you should be, and you get to the place where he wants you to be, and you missed a one-on-one tackle, well, you've got to take accountability. So it's the same in attack. If you're getting into good shape and you're dropping the ball, well, there's not a lot the coach can do at that particular moment if you're not getting into the position or if you're not holding someone in defence. So the players have got to take responsibility here. And the reality is, I think, they've 10 away with the emerging Ireland side, and some really young, exciting players. And you see the Ruan Quinn, I think Patrick Campbell is a great prospect, a Dogbo. Fionn Gibbons is on the bench tonight. He did really well with the 20. So there will come a point, Adrian, where people will say, well, just play the young players. If we're going to lose anyway, let's play the young players. At least in 12 months' time, they'll have gained the experience. So it's a kind of a critical period and moment for some of the more senior players that they've got to... And that kind of really enhances tonight, doesn't it?
I can't wait for it. And
because you think Connacht have Leinster coming next week.
Yeah.
So imagine if they lost tonight and then Leinster coming to Galway next week.
Well, they're in the habit of beating them down there, particularly. But
but potentially it could be 5 from 0 from 5.
Yeah,
and Munster have, they lose tonight. That's 0 from 4. Well, they've 1 from 4. They've got the Bulls coming. They've got to go to the Aviva, and then they've got Ulster. So, usually this time of year you get a few fixtures that you pick up a few results, and you might lose 1 or 2, but you've won 3 or 4 out of the first block. Both these sides are in real danger of putting themselves in a position of forget playoffs, not even making Europe.
Yeah.
So it's unfair pressure so early. Connacht's their away fixtures are down to the 4G pitch and stuff like that. But look, it's a very hard game to call. If you ask me who's going to win tonight, it's difficult. I like the Munster pack in a sense that, with Byrne and Klein.
It's probably the first pick back row as well.
Gavin Coombs coming back as well.
That's the first pick back row, is it?
Yeah, it is, I think. But they're still down numbers. Chris Farrell's not there. Zebo's not there. Haley's injured. Anton Frisch is away, who looked very good during the week against the Pumas. So it'll be really interesting to see Hawkshaw playing the 12 tonight for Connacht. He's a very good footballer. Jack Carty, obviously, back for Connacht is a big boost for them.
Boost. It sounds like everything you've said so far is leading to Connacht are going to win it.
Well, they'll believe they can win it, I think, and that helps. I played against Connacht many times in my career, and I always felt that they never believed they could beat us. It was a case of, but that's changed. The culture has changed there, and they've players who really believe they can. And Munster, even though they're not the Munster of old, are still a big scalp for everyone. We saw the reaction in the Dragons a few weeks. So you can imagine if Connacht get the results, which they did last January, which was a big kind of talking point in Munster season and Johan van Gran's reign, where Munster passed the ball 45 times in the game. They were beaten 10-8. They should have been beaten by a lot more. You can imagine if Connacht, the crowd are going to be buzzing for that tonight. So there's a lot to play for both sides. Munster can kind of kickstart their season, and Connacht can obviously as well.
Yeah. Can I just briefly ask you, Quinny, just on the spectacle itself before we wrap up? Like Annie Friend pointed this out during the week, talking about the water breaks, and I think one of Munster's halves against Zebra last week, there was actually 55
or 66 minutes, first half.
Like, I'm not saying it's an identity crisis for rugby, but this is an interest levels thing where people are just going to drop off and not watch games because they're going on for far too long. Like, will it get to a crisis point where we need to actually look at, well, the water breaks is one simple fix, but there's a deeper thing here where
water breaks need to go. There's enough of stoppages to throw in a water bottle here and there and there's going to be an injury or two per half where somebody's down for a minute, that the guys who run in with messages, these water breaks have to go, I think. Although sometimes if I was out in the field, you'd feel like you'd love about 5 minutes to gulp it down. The TMO stuff is, again, it's really poor. Niall Scannell's try last week wasn't a try for me. They gave over 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes, looking over and back. When the viewers or the people looking at the screen at the stadium could see.
You can't really do the football thing of let the play continue and then come back to it, can you? Because it's attritional and that doesn't feel
for a try scoring thing there you have to, I think, with the foul play and potential foul play and stuff, obviously the play goes on and a TMO check comes in.
But it shouldn't be going back 7 or 8 phases to look for forward pass.
It is an issue, and I agree with Andy Friend on a point that Connacht are a team that really want to play with flow and tempo because that's their game. They want to keep going and wear teams down and get into multi-phase and get into 10, 12, 15 phases because they have that ambition, and he's programmed them to play like that. I think the day that we see Munster kind of getting to that level would be great, but there's a lot of work. It takes time. It takes a lot of time, and who knows, Munster might surprise people tonight and really get a really good performance. Who knows? I think they need one. And there's a fair bit of pressure there for both sides. Obviously we spoke about, so it should be a cracker.
Really looking forward to it. That game is 7:35 tonight, obviously in Galway. You can watch it on TG Car, and then you have Leinster against the Sharks tomorrow at 5:05, and you have Ulster at home against the Ospreys in Belfast later on that evening as well. So that's your rugby for the weekend. Look forward to catching up with you next week, Quinny. Thanks a million.
Cheers. Thanks.
Fair play. It is 9:37. That is pretty much it from OTB AM this morning. Shane, good luck this evening.
Cheers, Adrian. I'll be
quite know what you're doing down there yet, but
he's a Connacht fan as well. I forgot to put him up on
that. Yeah. I mean, you give me
fella Tommy from
grief.
Tommy Bow country, and he's a Connacht fan.
I'm a Tommy Bow fan and a Connacht fan.
Can't be both.
You can't. I'm not alone. We had a Calvin commenter coming in this morning backing me up, so
that is definitely a conversation we'll be coming back to again down the track.